They arrive in Dubai, they keep their passport, and then they're forced to work in a massage parlor to offer like sex services, and basically they're a sex slave in Dubai.
They call it the city of the future, a skyline carved from sand and ambition. The tallest tower, artificial islands, and Lamborghinis for police, Dubai is sold as a billionaire's paradise. But most visitors don't realize that the glossy image hides a much darker truth. Because behind the luxury lies another version of Dubai, one they don't put on postcards. Ever wondered who keeps this city running? Who builds the towers and cleans the floors? This is not the Dubai you'd see in your Instagram feed. This is the reality they don't want tourists to see, where workers live in overcrowded camps, earn $200 a month, and risk everything just to get by. Welcome to the dark side of Dubai, the Dubai they don't want you to see or know. The Golden City. Dubai sits on the southeastern edge of the Persian Gulf, right in the middle of the Arabian Desert, a location that offers direct links to the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and Africa. It belongs to the United Arab Emirates, a union of 7 emirates, and Dubai is only one of them. That comes as a surprise to many, doesn't it? Alongside Dubai, the United Arab Emirates includes Abu Dhabi, Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah, Al Quwain, and Ajman. And while Dubai is the most well-known, the actual capital of the country is the city of Abu Dhabi, which shares its name with the emirate itself. Dubai is a striking city built in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Surrounded by endless dunes and facing the Persian Gulf, it draws attention for its sharp contrasts. On one side, you see glowing skyscrapers and vibrant city lights. On the other, vast stretches of dry, golden desert. And even though it seems like nothing but sand and sun, Dubai surprises people with how diverse its scenery really is. This city, now a symbol of modernity and wealth, had a much humbler beginning. At the start of the 20th century, Dubai was nothing more than a small fishing town. Its local port spurred growth, pushing maritime trade and pearl diving, which slowly turned it into a regional hub for commerce.
No water, no electricity. We are living in a fishing village on basic existence.
Everything changed in 1966 when oil was discovered in the Fateh field, about 120 kilometers east of the city. That oil money kick-started a transformation. But Dubai didn't rely on oil alone. Over time, it broadened its economic base to include sectors like trade, finance, tourism, and services. Now Dubai thrives on a mix of industries and doesn't rely solely on oil to move forward.
A large part of the world's oil supplies comes from the Persian Gulf. And now a 6th and a new name, Abu Dhabi.
Still, despite pouring money into the city's transformation, most of the spending has focused on appearance, not long-term infrastructure. One famous example is the line of pit trucks used to manually collect the city's sewage. Even though those scenes are old and much has improved since then, they highlighted how authorities prioritized skyscrapers before they considered basic urban systems. To this day, the tanker method is still used in some areas because the full sewage network isn't expected to be finished until 2025. As Dubai expanded, it became a regular on lists ranking the world's most developed cities. But many parts of the land that once supported farming have been taken over by buildings and roads. And here's the twist. Desertification is speeding up that loss. Between 2002 and 2018 alone, Dubai lost 56% of its usable farmland. More than half gone. And this was happening just as the need for resources like water and food was sharply rising. From 2004 to 2019, Dubai's population tripled, going from 1 million to over 3.3 million, a massive leap. But poor planning and questionable choices followed. These shifts pushed the demand for local food higher, and the country became more reliant on imports to keep up, even though it aimed to grow more self-sufficient. Want some eye-opening numbers? Dubai's current population tops 3 million. And nearly 90% are foreigners. It's a melting pot of cultures, where Islam is the main religion and luxury is part of the brand. Tourism plays a key role in the economy, and every new structure seems to declare loudly, "Welcome to the future."
We are in the beautiful Miracle Garden in Dubai, and it seems like it's everything they've been lacking.
But what about the version of Dubai that never makes it into the tourist brochures? The dark side. You've probably heard the phrase "from luxury to trash." Well, it fits this story perfectly. There is an unseen line dividing Dubai in half. On one side, you have the glossy world of five-star hotels, man-made beaches, and upscale restaurants where vacationers lounge beneath the desert sun. But cross that line, and you enter a place that feels like a different dimension, where all the glamour disappears and survival becomes the daily goal. That place is known as Sonapur, and it resembles a detention center far more than a residential space. This is where migrant laborers live, the same workers responsible for building the futuristic Dubai seen in glossy ads, yet they live far from the shine and splendor. In place of designer interiors and skyline views, Sonapur offers overcrowded shelters where even the most basic routines are shared. Rooms, meals, rest, and the constant weight of exhaustion. After all, if something sparkles on the surface, someone has to endure the hardship to make it happen. That is the trade-off. Comfort for some, struggle for others. To grasp how this severe contrast came to exist, we need to take a step back. In the 1960s, Dubai was nothing more than a British-controlled outpost, a quiet fishing and trading village, a place where herders crossed the sands, and daily life was simple and slow.
Abu Dhabi has no fresh water. People take cans to the distillation plant and buy purified seawater.
Then, almost overnight, everything shifted. The discovery of oil turned that small port town into one of the wealthiest places on Earth. Practically overnight, the desert village was swept into a tidal wave of construction and economic growth. It became a magnet for those chasing new beginnings, drawing people from all corners of the globe. Soon after, organized efforts began to recruit workers from abroad. And today, roughly 85% of Dubai's residents are foreigners. They arrive from South Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and even from across the Atlantic in America. On the surface, this global blend paints Dubai as a place of inclusion, a city with space for everyone. And to some extent, that is true. But let's not pretend everyone shares the same space equally. Some people rise to penthouses, while others stay confined to cramped quarters on the edges of the city. In Sonapur, that contrast is everywhere, so why would anyone endure these conditions? The dark machinery behind the shine. The answer is far more complex than you might think. It's worth remembering that people who leave their respective countries are in search of better conditions. So many of these workers hope that with the money they receive, they will be able to support their families, pay for studies, and provide better living conditions for their loved ones back home. According to the 2023 Global Slavery Index, on any given day in 2021, 132,000 individuals were living in modern slavery in the United Arab Emirates. That's 13 people out of every 1,000. This number places the UAE as the second highest in the Arab states region and seventh highest globally for modern slavery prevalence. The core of this crisis, a system known as kafala. It's a sponsorship system that binds migrant workers to their employers, giving companies unchecked power over their employees' ability to work, live, or even leave the country. This work permit becomes a leash. Under this system, workers are often unable to access legal protection or quit their job without serious consequences. And while the government has introduced reforms in recent years, these changes haven't been enough to dismantle the system or level the power imbalance. Many of these workers, especially those in construction, domestic work and services, find themselves trapped in conditions that meet every definition of forced labor.
Kaya wag kang magreklamo, wala kang karapatang magreklamo kasi binili ka namin.
Investigations into Expo 2020 Dubai uncovered serious abuses. But you might be wondering, why don't they just leave? Most of them lose their rights the moment they set foot in the United Arab Emirates. As soon as they arrive, their employers confiscate their passports and send them straight to Sonapur, where they are virtually isolated. Women are often recruited under false promises of good jobs and decent pay, only to be sold into domestic labor or adult work upon arrival. And to make matters worse, local legislation is not on the side of immigrants.
They have no guarantee that they will end up with such salaries or even good working conditions.
The government did report identifying one person in forced labor in 2021, the first time since 2016, but no further details were made public. Meanwhile, forced begging has also surfaced. In one 2021 case, 3 Egyptian women were arrested for repeatedly traveling to Dubai to force children to beg on the streets. Even more hidden is the issue of forced and child marriage. While there are no official national estimates, the United Kingdom's Forced Marriage Unit has recorded 14 cases involving British nationals forced into marriage in the UAE since 2018, 7 of those in 2020 alone, despite pandemic travel restrictions. The UAE's legal framework does not criminalize forced marriage, and the country allows exceptions that undermine the official minimum marriage age of 18, enabling judges to approve marriages for girls deemed mature. While the UAE is among the wealthier countries taking some action against modern slavery, its structural issues run deep. Systemic discrimination, lack of protections, and the continued power of employers over workers feed into a cycle where thousands remain invisible. Migrants often fear reporting abuse because leaving a job without permission can mean being labeled an absconder, a status that leads to detention or deportation. In 2020, the government even launched a program encouraging employers to report absconding domestic workers, making it even riskier for victims of abuse to escape. Dubai may have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world, around 0.05%, but this hides a complicated reality. Those who lose their jobs have just 30 days to find a new occupation, or they will be deported. In other words, for many, taking any job that comes along is the only way to keep going. And so these workers end up trapped in a cycle where they live with countless restrictions, saving the bare minimum to send some money to their families when they can. Most live in extreme need, struggling even to cover basic expenses. But what does life actually look like when your entire future depends on a job that barely covers survival? Trapped in paradise. A cleaner's monthly wage in Dubai is typically around 800 dirhams, which comes to approximately $200. From that amount, more than half is sent to his family, while the rest must cover his own needs. It might appear like a reasonable income when compared to the minimum wages in certain countries.
Migrant workers make up almost 90% of the UAE's population, with most of them coming from South Asian countries.
But one must not forget how expensive life in Dubai really is. To put it in perspective, renting a basic studio apartment, often referred to locally as a one-piece, can cost anywhere between 1,500 to 4,000 dirhams. Try picturing what it is like to survive on such limited income in a place where prices are high across the board. The only option is to split costs. On average, a worker will share a room with about 5 others to stretch their earnings and cover the essentials like food, clothing, and transport. The paycheck that once seemed like a step toward a better life ends up falling short. Instead of progress, it turns into a daily battle just to keep going. Many migrants fall into debt and become trapped in a repeating cycle of hardship and fatigue. What began with hope becomes harder to hold on to with each passing day. Can you see now why most cannot simply walk away? Leaving is not an option when you have no passport, no savings, and loans hanging over your head. On top of that, some of these men are not even paid. It is not unusual to see signs held up by workers pleading with their employer for the money they are owed so they can finally go home.
Salaries range between 140 to 220 US dollars a month, money most sent back home to support family.
And it is within this bleak environment that even darker realities begin to surface. Imagine being separated from your family for years, not just by distance, but by a growing emotional divide. Many of these workers arrived full of motivation and hope. Yet over time, that bright dream of success in Dubai dulls into a draining cycle that wears down both the body and the mind. The city's brilliance remains far away, untouched. But the toll is not only physical. The emotional weight is intense. Loneliness creeps in. Days begin to blur. Many find themselves sinking into a numb routine where life feels drained of meaning.
Many live in overcrowded labor camps. They sleep in cramped dormitories where sanitation is often poor.
The glow of Dubai, once seen as a symbol of new beginnings, turns into a heavy, choking shadow. For some, the burden becomes too much to bear. While they scrape by on the bare minimum, the luxury surrounding them climbs to unimaginable heights. There are gold-covered cars, palaces that seem lifted from fantasy, items on display that defy logic. And yes, in the United Arab Emirates, this kind of excess is not uncommon. The nation holds vast mineral wealth. There is so much abundance, it becomes easy for those at the top to ignore the human cost required to uphold it. Days for these workers are long, demanding, and full of strain. Men living in Sonapur often do not even have the basic tools to stay clean. The buildings meant to house them, called labor camps or work camps, are usually in poor condition. Inside, it is common to find several men squeezed into small rooms, sometimes 10 to 15 people packed into 10 square meters. Bathrooms and showers are shared by large groups, and the facilities are often in a bad state. In many of these places, there is barely a functioning shower. Workers resort to buckets. The kitchens are shared as well, often filthy, and fall well below any reasonable standard.
But for these workers, there is one worse fate than this: heading home without their unpaid wages.
What's more unsettling is that many of these spaces are built by the labourers themselves, without proper oversight or approval from authorities. Some of the buildings do have air conditioning to help withstand the desert heat, but even that is unreliable. poor upkeep makes it almost useless in the sweltering climate. The end result? Conditions that many would describe as nearly unlivable. But if life indoors offers little relief, what about those who spend their days outside on rooftops, roads, and construction sites under a sun that shows no mercy? Scorched. Under the sun, the hidden heat crisis. Between the months of April and September, when most of the world plans summer vacations, migrant workers across the Gulf and Dubai brace for something else entirely: survival. The temperatures here rise to punishing levels. And behind every skyscraper, luxury resort, and delivery app is a worker pushing through brutal, unrelenting heat. According to a study by a human rights organization, migrant workers in the UAE are being forced to labor for up to 14 hours a day in wet bulb temperatures exceeding 45 degrees Celsius. Conditions so extreme that, by United Nations standards, all outdoor physical work should stop once the wet bulb reaches 32 degrees. That's the point where the human body can no longer cool itself. Organs begin to shut down. But for workers here, the job just gets harder. Between 2021 and May 2024, over 250 migrant workers across the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar were interviewed. Most were employed in construction, delivery services, domestic work, or private security.
These are just a handful of more than 1 million workers who left their country in search of a job in Qatar.
These jobs demand long hours outside, under one of the most intense heat waves on the planet. Speaking to these workers wasn't easy. Interviews were carried out in secret because simply sharing their truth could get them arrested, detained, or deported. Their stories paint a clear, harrowing picture. Nathan, a security guard from Kenya working in the UAE's renewables sector, told researchers that he was made to stand for more than 10 hours in the scorching sun, and this gave him a constant headache all the time. He takes painkillers to cool it down, which isn't good for his health. This discomfort reaches dangerous levels. The workers reported illegal work hours which went up to 84 hours a week with no overtime pay. They shared stories of dehydration, skin rashes, and heat stroke made worse by limited access to drinking water and barely any breaks. In Qatar, workers were given buckets of ice instead of proper hydration, forced to wait for the ice to melt before they could take turns drinking. Sahil, a food delivery worker from India, described how one routine afternoon nearly cost him his life. He picked up a delivery at around 1 p.m. While nearing the area, he felt dizzy and parked his bike. While taking out the bottle from the container, he felt awkward and collapsed. People around there carried him to the shade, sprayed water on his face, and brought him back to consciousness. The medics diagnosed that it was a heat stroke. Let that sink in. A man delivering lunch collapsed from heat stroke and nearly died on the job because no one stopped to question whether working at 45 degrees wet bulb temperature should be allowed. And while international climate summits debate long-term mitigation, millions of workers are already living the reality of the climate crisis today. They're not protected by policies or shaded by reform. They are out there every day, trading their long-term health for a few years of barely livable wages. Human rights advocates call this what it truly is: workplace violence, and it's costing lives. An estimated 10,000 migrant workers from South and Southeast Asia have died each year across the Gulf in recent years. Overwork, abusive conditions, and extreme heat among the top causes. But the system still demands more bodies. Dubai's rise as a symbol of progress hides this grim truth. While the city gleams in the sun, its workers are burning beneath it. Invisible hands, unseen wounds. In Sonapur, a labor camp far from the tourist trail, more than 1,000 workers from Dubai Contracting Company erupted in protest. Their anger was sparked by the death of Murad Ali, a 30-year-old Pakistani construction worker who was electrocuted while working on the Millennium Tower.
Protesters have clashed with police who died in a demonstration against the construction of a road.
One life lost, 1,000 voices raised, but the company's response was cold. "We are a very old company. We treat our workers well," said a DCC personnel manager. But the workers knew better. They had lived the reality behind the rhetoric. This wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was a symptom of a system built on silence. When COP28 opened in Dubai in late 2023, global leaders came to talk about climate action. But not many asked who built the very ground beneath their feet. The summit site, Expo City Dubai, was constructed by migrant workers facing non-payment of wages, illegal recruitment fees, passport confiscation, and extreme heat. And this, even under the supposed safety of the worker welfare policy. If this is what happens at globally scrutinized events, imagine the conditions for those working far from the spotlight. Migrant workers make up 88% of the UAE's population. They are the lifeblood of every major project. And yet, their rights are constantly trampled by the very system meant to regulate their employment. Despite labor reforms rolled out in 2021, core issues remain untouched. At the heart of it all lies the kafala system, a sponsorship regime that gives employers disproportionate power over every aspect of a worker's life. Job mobility is restricted, passports are confiscated. Speaking out or trying to leave often means detention and deportation. Even with protections like the midday summer work ban from 12:30 p.m. to 3 p.m., mid-June through mid-September, many workers report being forced to labor right through the heat. Studies show that injury risk peaks between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m., well outside the ban. In truth, the rules sound better on paper than they look in practice. Workers still lack cold water, shaded rest areas, and even air-conditioned transport. What happens when they fall sick or collapse under the heat? Most receive no medical insurance, no sick pay, and when the damage becomes chronic, they're sent back to their home countries to fend for themselves.
Construction workers will now be included in Washington's mandatory sick leave program.
The system punishes them twice, once with abuse and again with abandonment. Kidney failure is a recurring outcome. Migrant workers suffering from end-stage kidney disease return home with no support, stuck paying for treatments they can't afford, with lives permanently altered by jobs that leave them broken. It's not just physical. The mental toll of isolation, silence, and fear runs deep. The UAE bans workers from forming unions or striking. Dissent is met with swift suppression.
But the union is adamant it isn't.
Is to make people aware of it was a bit ridiculous.
Even research into labor conditions is dangerous. Civil society, nearly non-existent. Activists are shut down. Journalists self-censor. And the workers? They're voiceless by design. The paradox is brutal. While migrant workers help their families survive through remittances, those earnings are squeezed dry by illegal recruitment fees, which migrants often pay through loans with interest rates as high as 50%. In 2022, over 100,000 Bangladeshis, 122,000 Nepalis and 128,000 Pakistanis came to the UAE seeking opportunity. But what they often find are unpaid wages, arbitrary deductions, false contracts, and years of debt for jobs that were never what was promised.
The workers are coming from very poor countries, mostly Pakistan, Bangladesh and India. They're often villagers, often uneducated or illiterate.
The exploitation doesn't stop at wages. During Expo 2020, delivery riders and AC technicians described working through temperatures that reached 50 degrees Celsius, with no shade, no rest, and no safety. Gloves melted, phones overheated. Clients demanded swift repairs, but the cost was health, sometimes life. And while these workers build and sustain the UAE, back home, their families face another storm: climate disasters. Floods, droughts, lost farmland, ruined homes. The irony could not be more painful. The countries contributing less than 1% to global carbon emissions, Bangladesh at 0.48%, Pakistan at 0.98%, and Nepal at 0.10%, are the ones paying the highest price. When disaster struck back home, many workers were unable to send financial support to their families.
What seems like a fantastic salary, they don't know any better. We did speak to quite a few workers who were saying that when they go back, they're going to do all they can to discourage friends and family.
They were still trapped in a cycle of repaying recruitment loans or trying to recover from unpaid wages. Some chose to return early, broken and burdened with debt, not because they lacked the will to succeed, but because the system abandoned them. And where does that leave Dubai? The Abu Dhabi National Oil Company recently announced an increase in its oil production capacity, raising output from 4 million to 5 million barrels per day. A move like this directly contradicts any promise of climate action. Climate change is not some distant threat. It is already unfolding. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has issued a clear warning. Wet bulb temperatures in the Gulf region may soon exceed 35 degrees Celsius. That is the limit beyond which the human body cannot regulate heat, making survival nearly impossible. And yet, the UAE's answer is still the same calendar-based summer break. No wet bulb policy, no data transparency, no worker-centered safety net, just the same system repackaged. At COP28, President Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber pledged to put health at the center of climate talks. But until occupational heat protection, collective bargaining rights, and reparations reparations for abuse are addressed, that pledge remains just another speech in another air-conditioned hall. If Dubai wants to be a true leader, it has to start from the ground up, by protecting the people who built the ground in the first place. Because just beyond the polished streets and luxury towers lie areas most visitors will never see, zones so neglected, so unstable, that even the authorities warn people to stay away. But what makes these places so dangerous, and why are they being hidden? Dangerous zones. But if you're thinking of visiting Dubai, here's a warning. The areas where these workers live, like Sonapur, are considered risk zones. Avoid them because it is even forbidden by the local authorities, for obvious reasons. These zones are heavily surveilled, poorly maintained, and largely invisible on official maps. They lack proper sanitation, emergency services are scarce, and overcrowding makes them a hotbed for heat-related illness, disease outbreaks, and fire hazards. In some cases, entire blocks of labor housing have gone without consistent water or electricity for days. The misery, abandonment, and brutal reality of these communities don't match the city's luxurious image. You won't see them in travel brochures. Even taxi drivers hesitate to go there. Anyone looking at Dubai from the outside sees a modern paradise where everything seems possible. But this image is carefully constructed. The five-star hotels, award-winning restaurants, and exclusive events tell only a fraction of the story. What's not advertised are the labor camps tucked away from public view, where 10 men sleep in a single room and air conditioning is a privilege, not a right. The truth is that behind the glitter, there is a system that exploits the most vulnerable, turning workers into cogs in a machine that never stops. While tourists return home with memories of an enchanting city, migrant workers carry the weight of a life sacrificed for a dream that was never theirs. Sonapur is a silent, dark reminder that the luxury of a few is built on the sacrifice of many. But will this story one day be part of Dubai's narrative? Or will it remain in the shadows as the city grows, hiding the faces of those who build it? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.